Hi, Hillary. So, welcome back again. And if you would like to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do. We know that we're on the general subject of the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, and we had taken some testimony last week, which was really in the context of helping the committee understand why this was important. And we ended up making a recommendation to the Appropriations Committee that they include some funding. And the good news is that they did include some funding, and I don't know whether that news is filtered out of the building yet, but the House Appropriations Committee is planning in the bill that we take up maybe tomorrow to include some funding for the program. So it'd be wonderful to hear your story and your perspective to help us make the case if there are questions.
Very good. That's so exciting to hear. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Hillary Martin, and I just love talking to you folks. I love the opportunity to talk to our legislators about what I do and what I care about so much, and happy to be here today in support of the food bank's budget request. Thank you so much for supporting that in that step. And yeah, very happy to talk with you about Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. I come from Burlington, Vermont, and I live here and co-own Diggers Mirth Collective Farm. And we rent and manage 15 acres in the Inner Vale, and there we have profitably raised organic vegetables since 1992. The farm's collectively owned, and we support 6 owners and then anywhere from 1 to 3 seasonal employees. And we raise a mix of vegetables that we sell just almost entirely, really entirely in Burlington to stores and restaurants. We also sell to Sodexo at UVM. We sell at one farmer's market, and we are fortunate to be a part of the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program. Our work with the food bank began as a pandemic response, and that was grant funded, but thanks to the food bank's advocacy and organizing, this program has continued, and we're now preparing for the 2026 season and hoping for more years to come after that. So here's how it works. The food bank contracts us to create weekly shares of vegetables from July through October. So we are paid retail value for those shares, and then we're given control entirely of what we grow and how to distribute the crops through that 12 to 16 week period that they're being distributed. We grow the crops, we wash and we pack them, we organize them into shares, and then we deliver them once a week to our partners. And those for the last 2 years have been the Family Room and Feeding Champlain Valley. And they then in turn deliver them to the recipients of the vegetables. At Diggers, we grow crops that are they're primarily going to new American families, and so we grow the crops that are desired by those recipients. And that's largely informed by our years of selling directly to new Americans at the neighborhood farmers market that our farm founded back in 1992. So since then, there's waves of people who come and settle in Burlington. So that's included folks from Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, Sudan, Somalia, the Congo, Burundi, Nepal, Afghanistan. And so we really have a sense of what people look for and which vegetables bring them the joy and confidence and the comfort of their home cultures. And so our contract with Vermonters Feeding Vermonters it's really like our favorite account because we're able to provide fresh and healthy food with a premium quality and a sizable quantity, and it gets directly into kitchens of people who need them. Our community partners are really embedded in the community, and they know how to get produce to the people, and they are empathetic, flexible, and professional. They understand proper handling and cooling needs of the vegetables and distribute it super efficiently so that we're not like running all over town to different households. We just do one drop. It's been profitable for us, highly efficient, and it's a super consistent market that gives our farm trust and control and flexibility. And then kindness and caring is at the root of this project, and it really radiates outward. It's a total joy to be growing produce for these folks. And I just want to tip my hat to our community partners. The family room is intimately linked with families across the city and their needs, and people really seek their services for childcare and language help, access to services, etc., anything that makes a healthy family. So the organization really knows who, who is in need and like how to get it to them. And you're probably familiar with Feeding Champlain Valley. They have the biggest food shelf in Burlington, and they distribute food assistance in 4 counties. And we just love that we can focus on growing vegetables, and then they do the work of distributing them. And part of the food bank's funding request is not just for growers, but really for the essential work that these organizations take on. And they're like filling people's pantries and fridges and through emergencies as well, so that we can really just focus on growing the food. So the pandemic really changed the landscape of the markets of the farm. It disrupted how and where people shopped, and those changes haven't all bounced back. And so since the pandemic, we've seen sales at our retail store accounts dipping a little bit, and restaurant accounts are struggling. Farmers market sales really spiked during COVID with outdoor shopping, and the stimulus checks probably helped that. But since 2022, they've also been kind of dipping, and probably, of course, because everybody's costs are rising and budgets in households are tighter. So at the farm, we're trying to weather this erratic conditions of like the pandemic and the economic strain, not to mention climate change, which I'm not sure if y'all remember, but I was also speaking to you last year about the request for emergency funding for farms during climate change. So we're really just trying to navigate all of these things. So we see Vermonters Feeding Vermonters as this win-win-win project. It provides security for farms like ours, which then supports the working lands economy. And it provides food security for our neighbors with fresh, healthy, local foods that are culturally specific. And then by supporting the most poor and vulnerable among us, our whole community becomes stronger. In closing, I submitted some photos of some of the examples of culturally specific vegetables that we grow and some of the shares that we've put together over the years. If you're curious, you can check that out. And thank you so much for taking the time to learn a little bit about our farm and learn about just listen to what the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program looks like from our end. And thank you for supporting the work of the food bank.
Thank you, Hillary. You have some time for questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, Representative Lipsky.
Well, Hillary, thank you. And it's as much of a comment to our committee and to you for your information. What Diggers Mirth contributes to the cultural and ethnic unique needs of new Americans is really heartwarming and critical, particularly in these times. But what you may not know, and the committee may not know, I sit on the National Guard and Veteran Affairs Caucus, and they have had a workforce challenge for recruitment and retention. The number one bright spot for the Vermont Guard has been in the New Americans community. This is direct from General Greg Knight, and he's reported to us, and we've met a number in this community. They're grateful to be here to serve, and your nurturing and all the benefits that the Guard has for training, education in many diverse ways and skills has been a wonderful partnership for all of Vermont. So thank you for your role in supporting new Americans.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I kind of wanted to make a note that just from my perspective of, selling at that farmer's market now for almost 25 years, it is really interesting to see new Americans coming through and using like federally and state subsidized programs to just at the market, to buy vegetables. And a lot of times we don't see those populations maintained at the farmers market. And I think the reason is because as they become established in Burlington, like they start their own markets and they start their own businesses and they really become part of the local economy. So in case there's kind of reticence about, I guess, the form of, if you want to call it charity, I think that kind of like what you were saying, it's like the people who come here and once they really get a foothold, they contribute so much in all these different ways. So it's not like we're like asking to just keep like giving people stuff. Do you know what I mean? I really see it as this really important step towards, we're welcoming folks, we're making them feel whole so that then they can really be true, a full part of the community.
Representative Bartholomew.
I was just curious, you mentioned the stuff you're growing for new Americans. What kind of things are those? Can you describe them? And I'm also wondering, is there stuff that people request from you that you can't grow here or get seeds or whatever?
Yeah, I guess some of the things that we grow, well, for example, some of the things we grow, it's like we grow them specifically for those populations. Maybe we were growing them for Vietnamese folks at the farmers market, and an example of that is like bitter melon or bok choy or a certain kind of a hakorai, which is a small salad turnip. Cilantro is something we grow, we sell to all of our markets. It's one of our second biggest crops, grossing. Of course, hugely popular across all cultures, but that one is always very, very popular with everybody that we grow for. So, and then there are things that people requested or we kind of brainstormed with some of our new American grower neighbors because there are many growers in the Intervale and at the Ethan Allen Homestead. So we did some tours of their farms and gardens and kind of got some hot tips about things that grow really well. And so things that we added are things like amaranth or callaloo, molokhia, which is another name for that is Egyptian spinach. So I don't know of anybody who knows of molokhia outside of, someone who's come from Africa or the Middle East. let's see, other things like we grow a kind of a gourd, like a bottle gourd type of fruit. And then there are a lot of other things that we, carrots or spinach is a hugely popular vegetable. So it's like we might not grow it specifically. We may have already been growing it, but we just noticed that folks like it, pick it up. African eggplant. I could kind of African eggplant, Asian eggplant.
So kind of related to Representative Bartholomew's question, you mentioned that you had some photographs, images of your produce, and I'm not sure where to find that. I just looked on our committee page and I didn't see it. Is that where it's supposed to be, or is it like your farm website? I was curious to see the photos and I couldn't find them.
Let me see if I can just pull it up and share the screen. Would that be helpful?
Okay, sure.
I think we may have it, we may have posted it from last week's,
Okay, I looked today and maybe it was from your original. That would make sense. I only looked for today.
Okay, let me see.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm dog sitting for my dad's dog and he's bad. I don't know if you could hear him. Does anyone else have a question while I try and pull this thing up?
John.
Yeah, my wife asked me this last night, and I think you'd be better to define it. What is the difference between a yam and a sweet potato? I'm sure some of your customers know the difference.
I think that my understanding is that a sweet potato just has like I might be wrong about this though, but I think a sweet potato has this like a higher sugar content.
We
Whereas
also have multiple kinds of sweet potatoes too.
Right, and
I don't know that there are multiple types.
Like a sweet potato, it might be one of those things where a sweet potato could be a yam, but not vice versa. Do you know what I mean? So sweet potato is like a kind of a yam.
You grow purple sweet potatoes from Japan?
We do sometimes just for fun. We don't.
Those are amazing and so nutritious. I mean, they're like a wonder food. Yeah.
They're so good. Okay, I found this document here. And now I will share my screen. I'm really good at computers. Let's see. Oh. Well.
You have to push the little green square, and then usually there's a little blue square that shows at the bottom of your screen, and then it should show up after that.
And Hillary, we don't want to put you through too many hoops, so we can figure out where to find them on our screen, and then I think it was not sure what day it was last week, but
22nd.
22nd.
Thursday.
Last Thursday.
I'm so sorry. And my computer is telling me.
That's all right. Well, I'll find it. If it was posted last week, I'll just look last week.
Yeah, this was rescheduled.
Okay.
But it looks good.
All right, I'm on the documents page. So the 27th.
We've got some people pulling it up and saying it looks very delicious.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
The bitter melon, I'm not sure you would like it, but I barely like it.
So just, can you tell us, in thinking about the cycle, the growing cycle and the time of year, are you now making plans? Where are you in the process of planning for this spring?
Yeah, I am submitting my seed orders today, actually. So, we try to wrap our crop planning. It's a little late for us. We really try to wrap our crop planning kind of at the end of the year for the next year, so we can get on top of seed orders and make sure we can secure a source for everything. So right now we're ordering seeds and securing all of our amendments. So yeah, we have all of those, the crops that we have penciled in for deliveries for that contract. We're already counting on that for sure.
Okay.
That's like
Okay.
part of the plan. And you know, counting all of our beds and how everything kind of fits together. You know, we have it's pretty small. It's a pretty small farm, but so sometimes we're like looking at like half bed, you know, 80 feet of this, and you know, we've got it all kind of stitched together in on our spreadsheets.
Representative Nelson has a follow-up, I think.
Hillary, yeah, I was surprised to hear you just ordered your seeds now and you weren't ready to start planting next week. I know you can't grow bananas or coffee, but being from the Northeast Kingdom, you get a much earlier start than I do. On a typical year, when do you plan on hands in the dirt?
We are, you know, we're starting in mid-March is when we start in the greenhouse getting plants going. But we're not in the field until usually like the third week of April is about when we can start working that soil and adding amendments. And sometimes we get seeds in there like that third week.
That's unfair.
You should come on down and check it out. It's fun.
I would love to.
We could do field trip.
You should come.
Intervale, we've never been, yeah.
Representative Boswell.
Yeah, so I visited the Intervale a few years ago, and there was a big flood that year, and I think it was maybe even just last year or 2 years ago. I'm wondering what happened to your crops that year, and how did you make things work? Because when I was there, somebody pulled up and said, "Oh, look at this amazing red eggplant from Afghanistan" or something, and it was so cool to see the crops. And they said, "But we can't eat any of this because it was all damaged in the flood." So we didn't have the farm security fund in place. What did you do when your crops got flooded?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We relied on a combination. We had an enormous amount of help from the state through BGAP. We also benefited from being part of the Intervale community. And the Intervale Center did a lot of fundraising just from people around in the community. And that was enormously helpful. And we were able to replant, and we had, so, you know, we just kind of like clean everything up, wait a little while, and then replant. There were a couple things there were tomato plants that we were actually able to salvage because the flood water, you know, any blossoms or fruit that got flooded were stripped. And then we were able to, you know, get a week harvest. Obviously the plants were pretty compromised from being flooded. And we had an incredible, like one of our best falls ever. A beautiful carrot crop, tons of kale. Yeah, so we, sort of the combination of filling in the gaps with help from the state and the community, and then really just going at it and being pretty aggressive with the replanting. And I'll say we have great partners up at UVM, and we've been like really trying to get as much data as possible, because as I'm sure you're aware, like there is like tension with Department of Health and like making sure, you know, we want to make sure obviously that we're planting into safe soil. I think after Irene was so widespread that there was really like this kind of blanket, like do not plant mandate. And it was really too late in the season to really plant anything anyway. So, but we're really interested in making sure we can have a balance between, you know, making sure that we're doing the safe thing, but also being able to proceed and use our lands to grow food. So UVM's been really awesome doing soil testing for petroleum, any kind of petroleum residues, heavy metals, and also doing testing for not only after the floods, but we get kind of a huge response from the community to help us get ready for the flood. And so now we've asked if UVM can deploy soil testing before the flood so that we can have some side-by-side data. So yeah, so that's been, we're just like so lucky to be so close to them and have some real dedicated partners.
Hillary, thank you for sharing that story. And as you noted, you were in last spring at some point to talk about the funding program that we were trying to set up for farmers who had experienced disasters of one sort or another, weather-related disasters. And that's also, we had some progress on that. The bill was in the Appropriations Committee after we saw it, and it was lingering there over the summer while we were not here. But first thing they did when they got back was to take some testimony in December, actually, and then they voted that out 2 weeks ago, and the House approved it.
I saw that.
So,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that that news did make it out beyond Montpelier, and so we're hopeful that there'll be some funding in the budget for next year for that.
That's great. Well, thank you all for being allies of farmers. I know you all, some of you all are farmers yourselves, but really appreciate your work out there.
Well, thank you for sharing the story.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye.
You imagine. They're in the dirt in April. They probably don't have to get out of the dirt until November.
But their ice fishing season ends a little earlier.
That's true. It starts later and ends earlier. You're right. There's compromises to everything.
So, Jamie, you can hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to just sort of set the stage here. We're going to transition from that topic to the topic of farmland conversion. And we'll remind the committee that we had some testimony last week. In fact, it was on two different occasions we heard about a disturbing finding, I guess, that there'd been some work done projecting farmland conversion and then some actual empirical data to compare what the expectations were, and we were seeing, oh, it's even worse than had been predicted.
That's good.
And they both referred us to your organization. So we really appreciate your being able to make some time this afternoon to come in and just do a little bit of a deeper dive into this subject.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Can someone just confirm, I'm trying to get my screen oriented here,
Yes.
that you can see the proper view of my slide deck?
Yeah, I think so. It looks like we have a full screen introductory slide, and so I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me just ask you, and I'll have you introduce yourself formally, but where are you based?
Sure, yeah, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Jamie Potter, and I'm Senior New England Program Manager at American Farmland Trust. I do work across all 6 New England states, but I'm physically in my home in Western Massachusetts right now in a little town called Ashfield.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah. And I believe my colleague Andrea Salazzo is in the room with you, but I can't really see. Are you there, Andrea?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, thank you, and apologize, Andrea, I didn't realize
I
you were.
wanted to introduce myself too. Andrea Salazzo, I'm based in Burlington, Vermont. I'm the Senior Manager for External Affairs, overseeing our policy and communications work across New England for AFG. So great to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for both of you. So, yeah, do you just want to run through what you've got there, Jamie?
Sure, yeah, and just to note, I believe I have about 30 minutes, so I have a presentation takes about 20 minutes, a little bit less. So I'm going to just present some of the data I've been sharing around Vermont that you've been hearing about. And then hopefully we'll have about 10 minutes or so for questions, or if you guys have more time, I'm happy to stick around.
We do have a little more time. Want to be mindful of your time as well, so don't hesitate to say if you need to jump off.
Okay, thank you. And just a caveat, I am having some camera issues, so my face may go a little dark if I'm moving around. I'm trying to get it resolved just to preface that, but I am here. And I'm just really excited to be with you all today. I'm just going to throw on my timer here. All right. Yes, so again, thank you for having me. I work at American Farmland Trust. I have been asked to share some of this data around Vermont, especially this sort of came about this past summer when I was invited by the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to participate in their regional listening sessions as part of the Vermont Conservation Plan process. So I've known those folks for a while, but really sort of was asked to bring more of our research and data to this process, and has really been exciting to see the reception and interest in this data. So I've been going around sharing it wherever I've been asked. But I just want to briefly, in case you're not as familiar with American Farmland Trust, just wanted to go briefly through the work that we do. You may know us from our No Farms, No Food bumper sticker, but you may not know exactly some of the work that our organization does. So American Farmland Trust, we are a national agricultural land trust. We were founded in 1980. And we work across the country to save the land that sustains us. We do that by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. We have about 250 staff, something like that nationally. And we have a really stellar team of boots on the ground staff right here in New England, including folks who do live in Vermont, including my fabulous colleague, Andrea, who's there with you in the room, doing all kinds of work, you know, from climate to policy to land protection, the whole gamut. We've got a tremendous team, many of them former or current farmers themselves. High level, we are doing a lot of great work in Vermont. I'm not going to go into all the specifics because it was too long really for this slide, but just sharing the fact that we have been doing a lot of great work with farmers and other partners on the ground to advance climate resilience and adaptation planning. We offer on-farm peer learning opportunities for farmers. We've been providing a lot of financial and technical assistance through microgrants and cost share programs, as well as our great policy and research teams partnering on various efforts to advance aspects of our mission on the ground in Vermont with our partners. But I'm really here to talk about data. Like I said, something that AFT has always done since our inception is really try to produce data and research that helps folks all across the country understand the threats to America's farmland. And so our most recent series of studies was called Farms Under Threat. And it looked at development trends from 2001 to 2016 across the country. And we found across the board that 11 million acres of farmland were fragmented or lost across the country during that time period, which translates to about 2,000 acres per day. And something of note that this study really did for the first time, that's really relevant to this conversation in Vermont, is that for the first time, we were really able to distinguish between different types of farmland conversion that we were seeing happening across the landscape. So historically, we were, able to really understand more of that left side of the spectrum that you're looking at, more of that urban and highly developed use, where something was a farm and we go and look back at a map and it's since been converted to something obviously not a farm, like a housing complex, a shopping mall, a parking lot. The more nuanced type of farmland conversion that we've been able to kind of newly understand and get a sense of is what we call this low density residential development, or LDR. And you all are very familiar with this type of development. It's all over Vermont, right? But it's really this sort of large lot sprawl type development where perhaps, a house lot is getting sold off, it becomes a lawn, maybe part of it's still an inactive agriculture, right? It's not necessarily gone all at once. But what our research showed was that, nationally in that 15-year time period, land that was in LDR was 23 times more likely to fully flip out of agriculture in that 15-year period than other types of ag land. And we call this multiplier effect. And so I'm going to be referencing this sort of multiplier effect throughout the conversation today. So what did we find in Vermont? Well, we found that from 2001 to 2016, over 21,000 acres of Vermont ag land were developed or compromised. And so interestingly, in that time period, about 17% was that full conversion out of agriculture to that urban and highly developed use, but 83% of that was into that low density residential type of development. So again, maybe that farm's not completely gone, but it's very vulnerable. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, that multiplier effect comes back into play, where we found that land in LDR in 2001 in Vermont was 5 times more likely to fully flip out of agriculture in that 15-year period than other types of ag land. This study also created this National Agricultural Land Protection Scorecard, where we ranked each state based on its policy responses in response to the level of conversion threat in that state. So just want to highlight that Vermont is doing really well. Vermont is really leading, nationally among its really important policies and programs that it's been leading on to address this concern. Based on our calculations, it ranked 5th nationally. I can share that data set with you all, but just really want to uplift the fact that Vermont is doing a lot of things right. Our most recent study was called Farms Under Threat 2040. And what we did was we essentially took those 2001 to 2016 projections, and we projected them out farther into the future, into the year 2040, under different kinds of potential development scenarios. So for Vermont, we had a business as usual scenario. What if we just keep chugging along how we were? We projected a conversion of about 41,000 acres of Vermont's farmland, most of that into LDR, you can see there in the orange color. We also created a runaway sprawl scenario, which presumes that a lot more farmland is unfortunately, that low density residential type of development is sort of sweeping across the countryside and displacing our farmland. And we projected nearly 62,000 acres of Vermont's farmland might be converted under that scenario, again, mostly to LDR. And then there's a better built cities or better built towns type of scenario, of course, one that we're promoting, which is one in which policymakers, land use planners, land trusts, all of us working together are promoting more compact development, reducing sprawl, protecting more farmland, et cetera. And so under that scenario, a little over 21,000 acres of projected conversion. And I want to uplift the fact, if you haven't seen it, that we also have these great state-specific pages and really want to, I'll send links after this meeting so you all have access to these, but this can be really helpful in kind of translating the threat into sort of the equivalency of, the number of farms, the amount of money in farm output, $24 million, 700 jobs. This can be really important and helpful to get out into the communities and the halls of Congress or, at the State House where you all are based. Our data is also really great in that you can drill down to the county level, so into your own districts, or can be very useful for planning agencies or land trusts or other organizations working in a particular county or region. So I just pulled a couple examples. Here we have Chittenden County, where you can kind of see the potential projected breakdown under these different scenarios. Again, a lot of low density residential type development, but a pretty significant amount of projected loss to urban and highly developed use under these scenarios in Chittenden County. As opposed to Caledonia County, more rural, you can see, vast majority into low density residential development. That's really the primary threat, much smaller amount of potential conversion into UHD type of development. So AFT did all these projections. We got this information out to states. We had all these webinar series, really just wanting to empower people with this information. And I'm sure a lot of you saw the Census of Agriculture came out a couple years ago. And you may have been alarmed, as many of us were, to see that, just in that 5-year period from 2017 to 2022, the 5-year period of the census report, Vermont reported a loss of 19,547 acres in farms, or 1.6%. again, we can't compare sort of this data set, which is reported by farmers, as you know, to our spatial data set. But for those of us who, nerd out about these things, obviously kind of raise some alarm bells that perhaps we were either on track or ahead of schedule in terms of the amount of farmland that we might be losing. And so when VHCB reached out to me this summer, like I said, to have me participate in these regional listening sessions, I was really excited to be able to go to our GIS mapping team here at AFT, and they offered to do a really interesting ground truthing analysis of the Farms Under Threat 2040 data, where they actually were able to ground truth the first 7 years from 2016 to 2023, so the first 7 years toward the 2040 projections, and help us understand what's already been happening on the ground. Are we seeing conversion happening where we projected it would be? Is it happening as quickly as we thought it might be? So I know you can't really see this map. We have a big poster that VHCB has printed somewhere, but I'm going to walk you through some of our findings. So what our GIS researchers found is that from 2016 to 2023, again, the first 7 years in our 2040 study, Vermont has already converted 19,832 acres of its farmland. So that means we've already converted 48% of what we had forecasted to lose by 2040 under business as usual scenario. That means the conversion is happening 65% faster than we had forecasted under business as usual, and even 10% faster than we had projected under that runaway sprawl scenario. So we're ahead of schedule, essentially. We were also really curious, and so we asked our researchers to kind of drill down to help us understand what type of farmland has already been converted. And to me and others, this has been really interesting that the vast majority of farmland conversion is happening on Vermont's hayfields. Over 12,000 acres of hayfields have already been converted in that 7-year time period. We don't know exactly why this is happening, right? We can't exactly correlate it. Right, but you can probably imagine farmers who might be struggling, landowners might be selling off, some of their hayfields for house lots. Maybe it's a lower value crop than some of their other land. There could be a variety of reasons, but really interesting to note. The next highest type of farmland getting converted is woodland associated with farmland, so over 3,700 acres. So landowners selling off pieces of their woodland for development. And that's followed by grassland and pasture, then corn, then fallow idle cropland, and then we combined all the other categories. We were also interested, obviously, into what type of development this farmland is getting converted into. So we can't really compare apples to apples of our, Farms Under Threat spatial analysis with this sort of ground truthing analysis that our team did. But the closest they were able to come up with, based on the National Land Cover database that they used, was that approximately about 76% of this conversion has gone into low density residential development. And about 24% is more of that total farm loss, that urban and highly developed land use type. So of course, we have been asking ourselves, and others have been asking, why are we losing farmland faster than AFT projected in our initial analysis? So there could be a number of reasons for that. One of those is that, during the initial study period, that 2001 to 2016, there was a housing recession in that time period. So if we had projected, which we did, those trends out to 2040, we could have been under forecasting the amount of development that was likely to occur. But on the other side of that, right, we know there's been this subsequent housing boom, this unanticipated move of people from urban areas to rural areas during COVID-19. We know a lot of people saw Vermont as very desirable and left the cities and wanted to do remote work and have been moving to places like Vermont. And then who knows, right, into the future, we're in this technically sort of quote post-COVID era. Perhaps some of these development trends may even out over time. But our real takeaway from our analysis is that we feel that farmland was developed more quickly and significantly in the first 7 years of the study than was projected. And so given how much land was consumed so quickly, we do feel that farmland conversion rates are likely to exceed our forecasts. There's also a lot of other compounding threats and issues going on at the same time, right? So you all are very familiar with this, right? We have an aging farmer population here in Vermont. Nearly 40% of Vermont producers are over age 65. We know anecdotally many do not haven't undertaken any estate planning or succession planning. We know that leaves their land potentially vulnerable to going out of production or something happening to it. And on the other side of that, right, we know this incoming generation of Vermont farmers who are really itching to get onto the land are really stymied by the high cost of farmland and housing in Vermont. And especially we know that for the nearly third of all Vermont producers who are new and beginning farmers and the nearly 10% of producers who are young farmers, we know they face added barriers to land access, things like access to capital, student loan debt, even knowing where to look to find these properties. We know these folks are really struggling to get onto the land. So we have this transition gap between this exiting generation and incoming generation, and many folks in Vermont working on this, I'm sure yourselves included. But this is obviously a significant factor in why farmland loss is happening. And then, of course, as you all well know, just the severe impacts that Vermont farmers have been navigating for years and years, but especially in the last few years, from severe flooding to drought, pest diseases, all of this obviously impacting the current and future viability of Vermont farmland, and potentially being a reason that perhaps some of these farms are going out of agriculture. And of course, there are many, many other compounding factors I haven't noted here. But to kind of summarize some of the takeaways from these data and trends that I've shared. So first, farmland conversion is happening faster than projected, most of it to low density residential type of development, most of it sort of on the outskirts of cities and towns, primarily on our hayfields, woodlands associated with farmland and pasture land. We know we have an aging farmer population without potentially some successors lined up, and that transition gap to a next generation really struggling to afford farmland and housing. We have these increasing economic and climate threats that are further impacting farm viability. And also sort of coupled with the fact that, you know, despite Vermont really being the gold standard of farmland conservation nationally and having done so much work in this area, still only about 15 to 20% of all Vermont's agricultural land is permanently protected. And that really leaves the remaining 75 to 80% of Vermont's ag land vulnerable to going out of production. So this is kind of my final summary slide. I shared this at the Vermont Farm to Plate conference. We had a whole panel of really wonderful experts, from housing to land trust to planners to policy folks. And this is just really highlighting the fact that this is obviously, as you all well know, a very complex problem that requires, you know, holistic solutions that so many of you are working to advance, and so many amazing organizations on the ground are already working really hard on. But to uplift the fact that to really address this mounting crisis, you know, we need to pick up the pace of land protection, continue to invest funding in permanently protecting land, continuing to address affordable housing, supporting the incoming generation of farmers in navigating the barriers to secure and affordable access to land, supporting an exiting generation and passing on and transferring their farms and businesses, really continuing to drill into farm viability and financing, really with farm viability being such a critical, you know, piece of the puzzle. And of course, land use planning, from regional planning to local zoning, all of it is just so critical to being able to help support and, you know, support the effort to sort of keep development off of the most important farmland while supporting affordable housing and other infrastructure and things that are needed throughout the state of Vermont. So I'm going to end there. I know that's a lot of information that I've presented to you rather quickly, but just wanted to share this information I have been sharing across the state, and want to open it up now to any questions or comments or reflections that you all might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. We had a couple of questions early on, so we might have you keep close to sharing in case we need to go back to look at the slides, but
okay, I can do that.
Representative O'Brien, I think, had a question.
Yeah, Jamie, just in your introduction, I wondered if the if your trust actually holds easements, do they act like a land trust account?
Yes, yes, we hold many thousands of acres of easements across the country. So we do operate as a land protection organization. We have a whole land protection team. Here in New England, we did actually a lot of the early easements that have since been handed off to local land trusts, but we tend not to hold as many easements in Vermont or New England because we have such tremendous local land trust partners to do that work. But we do a lot of support work, from education to local land trust to capacity building to advising on land protection deals.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. Two questions.
Yep.
So your low density housing, in Vermont, we have this 10-acre rule. For Act 250. That probably doesn't work too well if we want to make urban housing development. Of course, with the new Act 181 and Tier 1A and 1B, perhaps we'll tighten that up. You familiar with our Act 181?
I am still learning. I'm still learning your state. So
We are
you may
too.
pose some great ideas I don't fully understand or have answers to, but I can always get back to you with reflections
Yeah.
if I can't answer. Yeah.
And then, your loss of pasture land, grassland, pasture land into low density housing, I think that probably got a lot to do with the economics of farming and these lands not being as productive as the cropland, the corn land.
Mhm.
And that's why you're seeing such a more of a loss there, people buying hillside farms and
Yeah.
making 10, 20 lots and putting McMansions on them.
Yeah, and our colleague Sam Smith, who you might know from the Intervale, he was one of our panelists at the Farm to Plate conference, and was reflecting that that the exact data we shared is exactly what he's been seeing, in meeting with landowners and just his work across the landscape. That he was not at all surprised by the fact that it was hay fields and pasture land really being some of the first to be kind of sold off, given some of the challenges with especially dairy and other larger operations, really trying to sustain and keep going. And in order to do that, many are having to sell off house lots, which is really unfortunate and really speaks to the need for, again, I'm not a financial expert or viability expert, but how we can continue to support farms that are in a place where they may have to sell off these lots to remain viable. What are other interventions? What are other ways to support them so that ends up becoming more of a last resort? What support are they not getting, or what other interventions are needed?
Representative Burt.
Yeah, I was wondering more on the data side, you have a lot of figures on acres of land, and it mentions fragmented land, and also there's open, I think it was open development was possibly one of your terms, but I'm curious to know, how the data is actually taken in terms of, are you factoring just like the land that's currently it's no longer being cropped anymore, or is it, when it mentions fragmented land, does that mean, like, if say it's a 10-acre field and a 2-acre house lot is put on it, is it saying that all 10 acres have now been developed, or is it just saying that 2 of the acres have been developed? Does that make sense? I'm curious on the ground what it looks like more, right? Just to make sure, just for accurate analysis on my end.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm probably not going to do the best answering it. I think the initial data set is through the Farms Under Threat is based on sort of housing census tracts and kind of the 10th percentile of each of those census blocks, and kind of it kind of comes up with that for each county, and that's how it kind of figured out for that larger scale national analysis. For the ground truthing analysis that my colleagues did recently, I'd have to ask them more specifically, but they use the National Land Cover data set and crop layer data set, and I'm guessing it's when it flipped from being into one of those land use types into another land use type. But I'd have to get back to you on kind of the specifics of how they undertook that analysis.
Yeah, I just noticed, a lot of our farmland might have a 2 acre house lot carved out of it. But, they're still paying the other 8 acres. I just, for accuracy, just trying to understand whether that would be viewed as 10 acres now developed or 2. Yes, so appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty critical distinction.
This
Yeah. Representative Boswell.
Yeah, last year we spent a little time discussing the idea of letting farmers use part of their land to build housing, to continue to allow farming to happen on the land, but to have perhaps space for a younger farmer to move in, or the older original farmers would move into the new house and keep the old house there, but still to keep some of the tax protection and that kind of thing. And I think we had a fair amount of sympathy to the idea, because so many farmers aren't able to continue their farms because they can't find a place for people to live to continue. And then I talked to some folks from the housing conservation arena, and they were really hesitant about doing that even on a very limited basis. But I noticed, like in your slides, your green zone included some examples of transition of land and on a very limited basis. So I guess I'm wondering, what would your thoughts be about making some flexibility about developing a small amount of farmland in order to make extra housing to continue the farming? I mean, that's only related to the farming operation.
Yeah, I mean, I really defer to the folks at Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. I mean, my understanding is that's what they do, in that they are really thoughtfully sort of integrating the fact that farmers need housing, at least in their more modern easements. I can't speak to their older easements, but really trying to take into consideration, the housing needs of a permanently protected farm. I'm personally in favor of, getting creative around farmer and farm worker housing, whether it's inside of a conservation easement or outside of it or adjacent or in partnership with a conservation land trust partnering with an affordable housing trust. I think there's lots of different models and tools and ways that this can go. But I think it really does need to be figured out, because, especially if it's a livestock operation, as you all well know, right? You have to live on the farm. You can't live, another town away. And so I think it's really crucial. And the affordability piece, right? If folks can't afford to stay in their communities, or the workers can't afford to live there, it's not going to be sustainable for the future of that farm. So I'm in favor of it, but still would defer to the Vermont partners on that.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Solar farms. Y'all still consider that farmland, or because theoretically, once the solar panels die, they can be yanked out and it'll go back into farmland? Or are you, like some of us, you consider a loss of productive acres?
Such a great question. AFT has a stance where, we're not in support of solar that displaces farmland. We are very much in support of smart solar or dual use solar type of facilities that really are designed with agriculture in mind, where animals are grazing under the panels, where tractors and crops can happen under the panels. There's a lot of great examples of that happening across New England, and a lot of emerging companies that are really working to create that type of technology. I've seen these examples myself, and I think they are so appealing to many farmers who would otherwise maybe have to sell out to other kinds of solar companies or other kinds of non-farm uses, because they need to remain viable. And a solution like dual use solar, which AFT does promote, and we have policy recommendations and such all about, which I can send you all a link to, that's on our website. We really do feel is a win-win-win for farmers, because it can really help them be able to remain viable and stay on the land without displacing agriculture, and in some cases could even have beneficial effects like providing shade cover for livestock and all kinds of other potentially co-benefits of these types of newer technologies.
Do you know, Jamie, whether just in terms of the data here, again, going back to the question of what was being measured, if there were solar, but it was dual use, is that being counted as a loss or the conversion?
That's a good question. I'd have to check on that. I don't think it would be, but I'm not sure the level of the finite level that they're going down to. So I need to confer with my research colleagues on that. It's a great question.
Representative Litzy.
Thank you, Jamie. The amount of data you shared with us was really helpful and quite riveting. It should be no surprise to you that everyone on this committee cares deeply about conserving and keeping active ag land as well as forest land. So there was one, I noticed it seems like about 27 or 28% of the farmland lost. I guess it was in that the last census, 12,227 was actually ag land, and 3,751 acres were forest lands associated with farmland loss. So almost 30% or so. So this is, from your perspective as a value, we like forest land remaining connected to other forest land, but my observation going around rural Vermont that we also have a demographic crisis and we have a workforce crisis, and rural Vermont communities badly need residents, not just to farm, but to participate in their communities, their schools, serve as employees all over rural Vermont. And those models you showed of the sort of urban landscapes, which aren't broad around Vermont, to the, as Rep. Nelson said, the 10-acre rule, and Rep. Boslin referred to, we have been trying to steer and take down barriers so families can transition ownership, whether it's within the family or to a young farmer, which there are a lot of folks who come to Vermont want to farm. What if you have a hierarchy of ethics? I like the idea of keeping prime ag land open. And if you can find on the edge of a field or into the woodland where you can convert to residential that could serve the community, whether they're directly farming or in other services, it seems to be there's the alarm of losing farmland in Vermont at this amount is disturbing to conversion. Do you have any moral guidance for it or ethical guidance?
I mean, I think it's challenging, right? And folks have pointed out to me, right, that, I don't remember the statistics, but in terms of Vermont's housing goals, right, we're so far beneath meeting those. And so, we need more housing, right? It's got to go somewhere. And so, I would say that yes, for the housing that's relevant to the farmland, right? I think there's ways to design that housing that, tries to minimize its impact on the best ag fields and, it creates enough housing to help sustain the long-term viability of that farm operation. For non-farm housing, I think there are a lot of, zoning or, other measures where to really try to incentivize, clustering that housing or, designing or putting that housing in such a way that it's not just gonna sort of chew up, every last farm field in Vermont, but try in some way to, design it in such a way to not have it displace farmland. And I think that's really complicated because I've also heard, the really wonderful point in one of my talks that I gave that, a lot of people move to Vermont, we want to promote infill, right? But a lot of people move to Vermont, they want to have their own 10-acre homestead, right? They want to be out in the countryside. So that the kind of housing we want to promote may not be the kind of housing that people want. And I don't know how to resolve any of this. I'm just bringing some of the data, but I think it's, so much of it is parcel dependent, it's landowner dependent. For conservation projects, these happen one landowner at a time, one project at a time. But I do think from like a policy lens, from a zoning lens, I think there likely are interventions that probably could help and help remove the burden on the conservation community. We're never going to be able to protect that remaining 80% of all of Vermont's ag land. We need to find other ways to keep those farms viable, to help, reduce the potential impact from development on some of that farmland. And there are a lot of moral choices here, and I wish I had more answers, but
Well, to be clear, Vermont needs homesteaders. Vermont second homeowners and vacation homeowners bring a lot of global capital to the state, but they don't serve the needs of a sustainable economy in Vermont, other than the tax value of $1 million homes.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge for rural Vermont.
Yeah, I agree.
Who's next? Representative O'Brien.
Jamie, you've probably heard of this New England Feeds New England project, or Vermont Sustainable Jobs on partners on it. And I just wondered, looking at your data, can you project sort of out in New England where we passed the point where we could grow our own food because of loss and conversion?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think the next data project is getting together with our New England Feeding New England friends to try to mesh these data sets, because I don't know the answer to it, but I am alarmed. Because, right, that whole project is to see how much, how much are we already feeding ourselves? What would it take? And my data is sort of the opposite. It's like, how much are we losing? And so I think that would be a really interesting analysis to say, what type of farmland are we losing? Where are we losing it? And what does that mean for the future of our ability to feed ourselves according to New England Food Vision, New England Feeding New England analysis? It's next on my list because I am so eager to answer more of those questions and for you all to have that information.
Thank you.
Oh, Chairman, John, to that question, Jamie had great data from Rhode Island, from Massachusetts, Connecticut, all over New England, of the conversion rate. You got a lot of that data, and we did hear very important testimony a year or 2 years ago, originally 2 years ago, that you two bring a lot of good data together. Fine.
Who is it that you heard that data
We
from?
had testimony 2 years ago from
Ellen and Jake.
New England Feeding New England,
Yep.
from all those, Rhode Island had its specialty products, Mass. Man, it
Yeah.
was really, and that issue came up, one of the challenges was the loss of productive farmland. But all your incredible data, you could work well with them.
Absolutely. And my understanding is they're about to complete a protected lands data set as well, which, we have some high level data, but it's not as accurate as we would like it to be. And so I'm really eager to see that data set, because that will really kind of give more of be able to look with a fine tooth comb in terms of more precisely how much of our agricultural land is permanently protected and which is not. And yeah, just overlaying these data sets, I think, will be really fascinating, and as well just help to speak to that urgency. Really, I think that's why I've been, asked to talk about this in so many different places all across New England because I am really trying to convey, everybody's doing everything right, but there's just this added urgency where we are seeing farmland loss. Some of it's going to happen regardless, but it can be happening less, or we can be encouraging certain types of development or uses as opposed to others. So I think it really is a call to action. And Vermont is, really been extremely interested in this data set. I've been agreeing to present on it all across the state. And I am really just excited to see, given the level of sophistication of so many of our partners in Vermont, what we can come up with together as, some potential policy interventions, programmatic interventions, whatever those may be, to try to come together and address this problem from many different angles.
So, I mean, there's no easy answers, and we all have, I think, shared values that we share among each other that compete with each other at the same time for the different uses of land. So, any other questions?
Just one additional comment. Another interesting data set would be to look at farm profitability, because wherever farms are profitable, I would say the rate of loss and conversion is far less than when you look historically, even at Connecticut and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, at dairy farms and how they went out, very similarly to what's happening in Vermont. And then you look at Vermont, and it's going to be the smaller hill farm dairies going out before, the big dairies that are on some of the nicest soil in Vermont that can do large crop operations. So it'd be interesting to overlay that and see. You can almost predict where we're going to lose farms.
That's a great suggestion. That'd be a really interesting analysis. Thank you.
Don't look this year.
Oh, God.
Well, farms made money. This wouldn't even be a conversation.
It wouldn't even be a conversation.
Yep.
We'd be buying houses and tearing them out.
That's right. The other way.
Representative Bartholomew.
Just echoing what you're saying, but also you'd have to overlay, I believe, age of the farmer.
Yeah.
Because it's profitable, if there isn't an heir who wants to take it on, sell it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see the map that you had of New England map of value of land, or what land is priced at, and how actually it didn't seem like Vermont was the most expensive at all. The neighboring states are several times what acre costs here.
And I think that's why more people, so many folks I know where I live here in Massachusetts. I mean, we have the third highest farm real estate values in the nation, and in Mass, second only to, Rhode Island and New Jersey. Connecticut's right after us. So I think, folks are working hard in Massachusetts to get access to land, but I know so many who've just given up, and they're looking to more northern New England places where it is slightly more affordable. But we know that even given that relative affordability, that it really still is cost prohibitive for so many farmers to be able to take over these farms. And it also might be that some of the farms that are the ones that need taking over, right, or maybe like much larger than that next generation is looking for, right? So there might be, can that farm be split into a few smaller farms, or how do we transition that existing operation of that larger farm into another kind of operation that, potentially could be more viable for a next generation of a farmer or cooperative of farmers. So there's lots of considerations, but it's still cost prohibitive, unfortunately, for many of the next generation.
Representative Nelson, did you have a?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Jamie, okay, we got maybe one more question. Yes.
It's really the same observation as Rep. Bartholomew said. I had this autumn, went to Windsor, and I cut over toward Brownsville through West Windsor. And there are some incredible, it's miles of beautiful rolling side hill farms. Most of them had a gate, beautiful fencing, beautiful restored barn, and very beautiful house. No people there and no animals on the land. But it was stunning real estate as you headed over toward South Woodstock.
Mhm.
My question is that considered farmland? They are not destroying it. There is it's an antique McMansion. It was, beautiful, it wasn't brand new construction. The land is beautiful, but it's not an active.
It's a good
A lot of
question.
bush
Yeah.
hogging.
A lot of bush hogging, not hay crop.
Yeah, I mean, if they're just mowing it, right, is it really a farm? No, maybe it has the potential to become a farm again.
Right.
It's not a shopping mall, that's good. But yeah, I think to your point, it's such a major challenge of, folks coming in and buying up protected land. Luckily, or buying up, unprotected land. Luckily, Vermont does have the provision that at least protected land has to
Use.
transition to real qualified farmers. That I think has kept that from happening in many situations. But yeah, is it a farm? Not really, I don't think.
Place to site to solar.
What I want to know is, when you drove through most of my district and almost past our farm, why didn't you stop and say hello?
We were probably on a mission. It was a carload of 3, try to look at an equine that was in that neighborhood. Anyway, we were a little north of where you are, I think. Maybe not, I guess.
Little.
I'm just yanking your chain.
No, I know. Maybe I didn't know you other than our few conversations we had prior to being committee, so I wasn't comfortable enough. But my apologies.
Why don't we allow Jamie to get back to whatever else she has to do this afternoon? And thank you for coming in. Thank you both.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate that information. And if you do have information to send along, we'll make sure that it's distributed to everybody.
Great, I'll happily
Any
follow up with
follow-up?
some links. I'll get those to Patricia.
I
Yeah.
love the maps.
Yeah.
I love maps. I wanted to be on the map building team. Love maps.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for all that you do for Vermont. Appreciate your
All right.
service. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, Andrea. Bye.
All right, we'll take a break, Linda. And we'll be back in, let's say, 10 minutes.